Hello, this is Todd Luck, and this is an overview of Masters of the Universe Origins. This is the new toy line from Mattel that has put Masters of the Universe back on store shelves this year. And before we get started, I've been doing reviews of the individual figures, and I just wanted to add some additional thoughts to that now that I've had a chance to display them. First of all, I had some nitpicks about the head sculpts, and they were very minor nitpicks. And I will say that displaying them, you don't notice them at all. I mean, this is the way I display them, and you're not looking at them like this, the entire time. You're sitting, on your couch and looking at them on the shelf or on your TV stand or whatever. And so you're not noticing like itty bitty paint details on the eyes or something like that. These just look so good. I mean, I never knew I wanted to have fully posable figures like this of Masters of the Universe, done in this vintage style. But my God, it's just amazing looking at these guys every day for the last, month or so. And they've also been very stable. You just find that standing pose for them and leave them. And, they haven't like fallen off my TV stand or anything like that. So that's really cool. As a collector, sometimes some figures are better at that than others. They're not as stable as like a Megazord or something like with big blocky legs or something, but they're really good for a, standard, collectible figure that a kid might play with. And so the figures retail for about $15. This year they've been exclusive to Walmart, but next year they'll be opening up to all retailers. And so far in Wave 1, there's been He-Man, Teela, and Man-at-Arms for the Heroic Warriors, and then there's Skeletor and Beastman for the villains, along with Evil Lyn, who I don't have, and I'll get into that in a little bit. And they also released Battle Cat, who is really cool. He's much bigger than the original. And then the Sky Sled. Now this is just for illustration. This is the vintage Sky Sled because for whatever reason, I saw it on the shelves one time before the figures hit my Walmart, and that was it. So I don't know what happened to the Sky Sled. Hopefully, in the coming year, the production on that can be corrected and we can finally see it on store shelves and be able to get it. It does come with Prince Adam. And so what is Masters of the Universe? Well, I would trace its artistic inspiration all the way back to the early 20th century with Edgar Rice Burroughs, creator of Tarzan, who did a series of novels on Mars. And so his vision of Mars was this savage world where people wore harnesses, they showed a lot of skin, and they used swords to fight. And so this was kind of this world of high technology, but also swordplay. And so Frank Frazetta did these wonderful painted covers to help kind of define, what this world looked like. And so later, Frazetta would do Conan covers. And his concept of Conan was kind of taking that same aesthetic and putting it to Conan. And so it kind of turned him into this kind of primal man, sort of like a Neanderthal with a sword. And this kind of stuck as our popular culture conception of what a barbarian looks like. This is not necessarily how Conan dressed in the novels or how a historic barbarian would dress, but this is what we think of when we think of barbarians. And so in the 1980s, Mattel decided to use that barbarian aesthetic in a toy line called Masters of the Universe. And so it pit the heroic warrior He-Man versus the evil wizard Skeletor on a world of both magic and high technology called Eternia. And He-Man had plenty of heroic warriors that you could get toys of, and Skeletor had plenty of his evil warriors who usually looked like monsters that you could get as toys. And so it was a full line. And they even introduced other evil factions like the Evil Horde, which was led by Hordak, who is Skeletor's old mentor, and also the Snake Men, who used to rule Eternia and were overthrown by the First Men, just like in Robert E. Howard's Conan and Cole stories. And these figures were known for their excellent sculpts, very detailed sculpts showing off the muscular bodies, which were usually uniform between the figures. And they also had interchangeable armors that you could remove and use between figures. And they were also known for having action features. Sometimes it would just be twisting the waist. They would have spring-loaded waists, or something like this. To flesh out the story, each figure came with a mini comic that would tell you a complete story about the figure that you got. And then there was the classic Filmation cartoon, and I think that really helped turn Masters of the Universe into this big hit. It was a huge fad in the 80s. It was so popular, it spawned a girls' line with He-Man's sister She-Ra, who got an animated movie, The Secret of the Sword, and also her own cartoon series from Filmation. It even had a live-action movie directed by Gary Goddard and starring Dolph Lundgren as He-Man. And unfortunately, by then, Masters of the Universe was starting to flounder, and so eventually the line did get canceled. There was an attempt to revive it a few years later as a He-Man line of figures that were done on a different scale. This was a more science fiction oriented line that took He-Man and Skeletor into the future to a planet named Primus, where He-Man and the Galactic Guardians would fight the evil mutants led by Skeletor. But unfortunately, this really didn't catch on. It did have its own animated series, but it just didn't catch on, and it too was canceled. In the early 2000s, He-Man made another comeback with a new Masters of the Universe toy line with these wonderful sculpts from the Four Horsemen, and these also had interchangeable weapons and accessories and action features. And they also had a cartoon by Mike Young Productions that was quite good. It had serialized storytelling and went into the backgrounds of the characters, and that and the Filmation anime series were just amazing. But unfortunately, that only lasted a couple years. Nothing had really been able to capture the success of the original line. And so it went away again, and went away for many years. But there was a loyal fan base online of, aging collectors that Mattel decided to take advantage of, and eventually came up with a collector's line they offered through online orders. This was a subscription-only service called Masters of the Universe Classics, and you would subscribe to a year of figures, and you would get these figures. They were bigger. They were done on like a 7-inch collectible scale with, kind of your typical collectible figure articulation. Almost no action features, but, usually to be packed out with a lot of accessories, maybe an interchangeable head if you're really lucky. Unfortunately, these were rather expensive and kind of priced out of my range, but what they did was they kept it alive, and they kind of kept it going and slowly got it back into popular culture and paved the way for it to kind of come back. So in recent years, there's been a mobile game, there's been Masters of the Universe Hot Wheels, there's been Masters of the Universe Funko Pops and things like that. And Super 7 did these retro style figures of characters we didn't get in the original line, like this Hero, which was planned in the 1980s but was canceled before this spin-off line could come out of the Powers of Grayskull. And DreamWorks gave us a brand new She-Ra and the Princesses of Power cartoon, which was also quite good, and that wrapped up recently. And so there's finally momentum behind this franchise again. And so that's led us to almost getting a movie. It's still in the works. It was supposed to come out this year, but of course has been delayed for the millionth time. But there are 2 animated series in the works for Netflix, and one of them is headed by Kevin Smith, and so that should be really good. And so with the anticipation of all of that, Mattel finally decided that it was the right time to bring a Masters of the Universe figure line back to toy shelves. So when Classics was coming out, the collectible figure line, I didn't get it. And it's a great line, but I still didn't lament missing it. And I kind of sat there and thought, like, well, what would make me want to get a modern day Masters of the Universe figure? Because I've got a ton of Masters of the Universe figures, and I'm really happy with them. I mean, this is my childhood right here. What would make me want to get a new one? And so I sat there and I thought, like, well, I'd want them to be in the same scale. I'd want them to look just like the old ones. But, you know, with modern articulation, that's fine. They could be posable. That's great. A mix of characters that already existed, you know, just in case, you know, you were missing some and you wanted to fill in your collection. Or, you know, some new ones, too, that we didn't get, like Shadow Weaver or something like that. There were always these characters that, you know, appeared in the cartoons that we never got figures of. And I want them, you know, if they were packaged the same way, that'd be great. If they came with a mini comic, hell yeah. And they need to have the same, you know, kind of interchangeable armors that you could remove and all this stuff. And if they did all that, that would be an amazing line. And that's exactly what Masters of the Universe Classics is. So it is literally a fan's dream come true. These are figures that I've wanted my entire life. I just didn't know it. And so, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love these, you know, 7-inch scale collectible figures and all this stuff. But to me, this Masters of the Universe Classics line was a great collectible figure line based on Masters of the Universe. But this is Masters of the Universe. This is the scale I care about. This is the style of figure I care about. This, to me, is what this franchise is. And so as a cool added bonus, you can actually exchange body parts between the Masters of the Universe Origins figures. You can actually exchange heads and hands and arms and torsos to create your own characters or customize your figures. And this is cool because it's not just the new Masters of the Universe Origins line that this works for. It's also the Masters of the WWE Universe line, which mixes Masters of the Universe with WWE wrestlers. And it uses a lot of the same accessories as Masters of the Universe Origins. And so that's just a really, really cool bonus. And as I've said in my reviews, these figures, these new Masters of the Universe Origins figures, have pretty much all your standard modern articulation, except they're missing the ab cut. And I think that's a good thing because as much as you can avoid it, you shouldn't break up this beautiful body sculpt, first of all. So, you know, that's not going to add a whole lot of articulation, and it's going to add kind of an ugly cut there, which I'm totally cool with not having. And so it's also a good thing because when they try to do both the removable armors that you could exchange between figures and have that ab cut in Masters of the Universe Classics, it didn't work out that great. This was one of the few missteps of Masters of the Universe Classics, in my opinion, where they would make the armor and it would go down to, you know, kind of down to their abs, and then they would color their abs the same color as the armor. And then, you know, the rest of the chest would be colored the proper color. And so the problem was when you remove the armor, you get this really weird thing where he's wearing this two-tone shirt or something. It's just so strange. And unfortunately, I don't have any well-known characters in Classics to show you this with, but just imagine doing this with a character like Hordak or somebody like that. It was very strange, and I'm glad we kind of avoided that in Masters of the Universe Origins. As far as concerns about the line go, selection of figures is a big one for me. I have seen a huge glut of He-Man and Skeletor figures on the shelves. I have seen other figures sprinkled in with them. That's good, but it's not going to take much for the other characters to get sold out and stores to be left with nothing but He-Man and Skeletor. I hope this is corrected in the future because right now Walmarts are definitely going to be left with a huge glut of leftover He-Mans and Skeletors. And don't be afraid to update the figures to reflect how they've been portrayed over the years. They weren't afraid to do that with Man-at-Arms, who they added a mustache to more reflect how he's been portrayed over the years. The original figure did not have a mustache, but Filmation added one, and that kind of got added to canon. You know, he got portrayed with a mustache in everything, so, you know, his new Masters of the Universe Origins figure has a mustache. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened with other Masters of the Universe Origins figures, and mainly I'm talking about Evil Lyn, who does not look like this in her Origins figure. Instead, she has very bright yellow skin, just like the vintage one did, and I didn't find it attractive as a child. I still don't like it today, and that's why that's the one I didn't get. She looks like Yellow Peril Evil Lyn, to be honest with you. I am shocked that it's even on the shelves in 2020, especially considering this is more in line with how we've seen her portrayed over the years. Filmation gave her normal skin tone. The live-action movie and 2000s cartoon gave her very pale skin. So it's a little weird to see, you know, that bright yellow skin on Evil Lyn again. And another example of that is Merman, who we're going to get a Masters of the Universe Origins figure that looks an awful lot like this, with this weird owl-looking head, when this is the head that he's had in most other portrayals that this character has had, other than that vintage figure. He's had, you know, these fins that look more fish-like on his head. And so, yeah, I've got mixed feelings about that choice too, and I'm not sure if I'll be getting that figure or not. And I hope they keep giving us figures we did not get in the old line. They've already got a 2-pack coming of Keldor and Kronos, which are Skeletor before he became Skeletor, and Trapjaw before he lost his body parts. So I'm hoping more stuff like that comes out, because there's some real potential there. To me, my Evil Horde has always felt incomplete because I do not have a Shadow Weaver. I've got the 5 original Horde figures, but she really feels like that missing member of the original Horde. And I'd also love to get Scorpio. She is the coolest new character that they created for the Filmation cartoon of She-Ra. That design is just amazing, and I'd love to have a Masters Universe Origins figure of her. It would probably be a deluxe figure. You'd have to pack in the tail and attach it, and hopefully the tail would have like a couple points of articulation to give us some posing options. But since it would be a deluxe figure, it would give you the perfect opportunity to give her an alternate head and have a Scorpio with hair, white hair, just like the version of her in the new cartoon. So that way you could have the option of displaying her as classic Scorpio or as something that more resembles the new version of the character. And kids would love it because she's just such a cool looking character. And I know people get, you know, nervous about, you know, if female figures will sell. But I mean, the thing is, if kids want it, they'll buy it. If we've learned anything from Power Rangers and the Marvel figures and Star Wars, that those lines all do their female figures, and those lines are all doing fine. They've been doing this for years and decades, and they have been fine and given us all the female figures we could want. So, you know, don't be scared of that. And there's tons of other figures I want, but I'm not going to say them because it's probably a very niche thing. I mean, how many other people want a Negator? You know, probably not enough to make it worth their while. I think what they've got solicited is a very strong lineup, and I do plan on getting just about all of them. And this is my vintage Castle Grayskull in the background, by the way. They have a new Castle Grayskull coming, which I definitely do plan on getting. I hope I can pick it up off of store shelves. I trust, you know, being able to pick it up off a shelf more than I trust Walmart to ship it to me. So hopefully that'll work out. But I am floored for this line. Masters of the Universe was my childhood, and they have just done a fantastic job of recreating these figures, but giving us modern articulation. And I just couldn't be happier. I just never thought that I would be able to you know, be able to pose these characters like this and have them still look like the vintage figures. It's just amazing. This, again, is the action figure line I've wanted my entire life but didn't know it. So it is definitely a bright spot in an otherwise bleak year for humanity. So anyway, like and subscribe for more videos, and until next time, good journey.